Ambassador Crickstall's 4 eyes twitched nervously as he adjusted his ceremonial sash for the 7th time in 2 minutes. The emergency session of the Galactic Council had been called with unprecedented urgency, and the holographic assembly chamber buzzed with anxious chittering from representatives of 43 different species. Well, 42 now. The Xantharians had gone extinct last week, but honestly, nobody really missed them. They'd been insufferably smug about their 3-day life cycles. "Esteemed colleagues," Crickstall began, his voice cracking like a teenager asking someone to prom, "we face an unprecedented crisis. The humans have struck again." A collective gasp rippled through the chamber. The Blorvian delegate actually fainted, which was impressive considering Blorvians didn't technically have a circulatory system. Somewhere in the back, a Quitlac started hyperventilating through its gill slits. "What did they do this time?" asked Councillor Vexenara, her tentacles writhing with barely contained panic. "Please tell me they didn't figure out how to weaponize their beverage rituals." "Worse," Crickstall whispered, pulling up a holographic display. "They've colonized the Kepler 442 system, all 7 planets, in 3 weeks." The silence that followed could have been used to preserve food. Finally, someone managed to speak. "How is that possible? Our projections indicated it would take them at least 6 months to establish a single outpost. They used pizza boxes and something called duct tape to seal atmospheric breaches," Crickstall replied, his voice hollow with disbelief. "When their terraforming equipment failed, they just started breathing the toxic atmosphere anyway. Apparently it reminded them of a place called New Jersey." At that moment, the chamber doors slid open with unnecessary dramatic flair. Captain Riley Brooks strode in, her human confidence practically radiating off her like heat from a small star. She was followed by her crew, Lieutenant Commander Jake "Tank" Morrison, whose nickname had nothing to do with military vehicles and everything to do with his ability to consume alarming quantities of energy drinks, and Chief Engineer Luna Okafor, who'd once fixed a warp drive using nothing but hairpins and creative profanity. "Sorry I'm late," Brooks announced, completely ignoring the sea of horrified alien faces. "Traffic was murder. Had to take the scenic route around that black hole. Beautiful this time of year." Crickstall's translator struggled with the concept of scenic route and black hole being used in the same sentence. It settled on displaying several error messages and what appeared to be a digital cry for help. "Captain Brooks," Vexenara managed, her voice trembling, "you were summoned here to answer for your species' activities." Brooks looked genuinely confused. "Activities? You mean the colonization thing? We just needed somewhere to put the overflow from Earth. Do you have any idea how many humans want to start artisanal cheese farms in space? It's frankly ridiculous. You established 7 colonies in 3 weeks. Actually, it was 2.5 weeks. Tank here bet we couldn't do it in under 3, so naturally, we had to prove him wrong." She gestured at Tank, who was currently examining a ceremonial Bluvian crystal with the kind of intense interest usually reserved for watching paint dry. "Plus, Luna discovered that Kepler 442g has the perfect atmospheric conditions for growing coffee beans. Do you know how hard it is to find good coffee in space?" The Galactic Council stared at her. Somewhere in the background, a Crithnarian delegate was quietly updating his will. Brooks surveyed the room with the casual confidence of someone who had once convinced a supernova to postpone exploding because it was interfering with her lunch plans. "So what exactly is the problem here?" Crickstall straightened his sash again and activated the holographic evidence display. The first image showed what appeared to be a human consumption ritual involving dark liquid and various pastries. "Exhibit A," he announced dramatically. "We have documented proof that humans engage in daily narcotic consumption rituals. They gather in designated temples called coffee shops, where they consume a highly addictive substance they refer to as their life force." Brooks blinked. "That's just Starbucks." They perform these rituals multiple times per day, often becoming violent and incoherent when deprived of their substance. We have reports of humans threatening bodily harm before their morning consumption ceremony. "Okay, that part's actually true," Brooks admitted. "But it's not that serious." Luna leaned over and whispered loudly, "Remember when you threw your boot at Jenkins before coffee last Tuesday? That was different. He was playing his bagpipe music at 6 a.m. The evidence continued. A new hologram showed humans engaged in what appeared to be ritual combat in large arenas, with thousands of spectators cheering for violence. Exhibit B, Krickstall continued, his confidence growing. Mass gladiatorial events where humans train for warfare by attempting to move a spherical object across designated territories. The spectators enter frenzy states, painting their faces with tribal colors and consuming vast quantities of fermented beverages. Tank looked up from the crystal he'd been examining. "Hey, that's the Super Bowl. I had $20 on that game." "You see?" Krickstall exclaimed. "Gambling on combat outcomes. Clear evidence of a militaristic society." "It's football, not gladiatorial combat," Brooks protested. "They wear protective armor and engage in violent physical contact," Counselor Vexenara pointed out. "Well, yes, but nobody's trying to actually kill anyone, usually." The next exhibit showed what appeared to be mass mind control events, with thousands of humans moving in synchronization while subjected to rhythmic audio bombardment. Exhibit C. Mass psychological manipulation events where humans subject themselves to sonic warfare while engaging in synchronized movement patterns. These gatherings can last for days, during which participants survive on minimal sustenance and exhibit signs of psychological alteration. Brooks squinted at the display. "That's Coachella." "These mind control festivals occur regularly across human territories," Krickstall pressed on. "Participants often report having transcendent experiences and claim the events change their lives permanently." "Okay, that last part might be the drugs," Luna admitted quietly. "The evidence is overwhelming," Vexenara declared, her tentacles waving dramatically. "Humans are clearly a species driven by addiction, violence, and mass psychological manipulation. They cannot be reasoned with through normal diplomatic channels." Brooks looked around the chamber at 42 different species, all nodding in agreement with varying numbers of heads, and realized she was fighting an uphill battle. "Look, I get that we might seem a little intense from the outside, but we're really not that bad once you get to know us." "You colonized 7 planets because you lost a bet," Krickstall pointed out. "Fair point," Brooks conceded, "but think of it as enthusiasm rather than chaos. You fixed a warp core breach with pizza boxes, and it worked, didn't it? Sometimes the best solutions are the ones nobody expects." The Galactic Council exchanged worried looks. This was exactly the kind of unpredictable thinking that made humans so dangerous. They operated outside all known parameters of logic and reason, yet somehow their insane methods produced results that defied conventional understanding. "The decision is unanimous," Vexenara announced solemnly. "Humanity must be quarantined for the safety of the galaxy." Brooks felt her heart sink. "Come on, that seems a little extreme. We're not actually dangerous." "You once solved a diplomatic crisis by challenging the opposing ambassador to something called a dance-off," Krickstall reminded her. "And it worked. Ambassador Zixtal still sends me holiday cards." Just as Vexenara was about to formalize the quarantine decree, the chamber doors burst open with the kind of dramatic timing that suggested someone had been listening outside, waiting for the perfect moment to make an entrance. Enter Zara Voss, xenobiologist extraordinaire and the kind of person who kept exotic plants that tried to eat her research assistants. She wore a lab coat covered in what appeared to be glittery alien pollen and had the wild-eyed look of someone who'd had either too much caffeine or a breakthrough scientific revelation. Possibly both. "Wait," she called out, rushing into the chamber with a stack of datapads clutched against her chest. "Before you make any hasty decisions, I have a proposal that could solve everyone's problems." Krickstall's eye twitched. "Dr. Voss, this is a closed council session. How did you even get past security?" "I may have told them I was delivering lunch," Zara replied cheerfully. "Amazing how many doors open when you're carrying a tray of sandwiches." Brooks watched this newcomer with interest. Anyone who could bluff their way past Galactic Council security either had serious diplomatic credentials or was completely insane. Possibly both. "Esteemed council members," Zara began, setting down her datapads and pulling up her own holographic display. "I've spent the last 5 years studying human behavior patterns, and I believe I've found the solution to your concerns about their unpredictability." "And what exactly do you propose?" Vexenara asked, her tentacles curling with skepticism. Zara's grin could have powered a small space station. We treat them like pets. The silence that followed was so complete that you could have heard a Quitlac drop a pin. If Quitlacs had pins. Or could drop things. Pets? Krikstal repeated weakly. Think about it, Zara continued, warming to her subject. Humans exhibit many classic behaviors of domesticated creatures. They're pack animals, they respond well to positive reinforcement, and they can be trained to perform useful tasks. They even engage in what we would consider pet-like behaviors, such as playing with toys, seeking approval from authority figures, and making adorable noises when content. Brooks felt her jaw drop. Did she just call us adorable? The key is understanding their psychology, Zara went on, completely ignoring the growing murmur of disbelief from the council. Humans aren't inherently chaotic, they're just easily bored. Give them interesting problems to solve, reward them appropriately, and they become incredibly useful companions. Tank leaned over to Luna. Did we just get compared to space dogs? I think so, Luna whispered back. I'm weirdly not offended. Zara pulled up a detailed presentation that looked like it had been prepared by someone with either too much time or too much dedication. I've developed a comprehensive human care manual, complete with feeding schedules, enrichment activities, and behavioral modification techniques. This is insane, Vexenara protested. You can't just domesticate an entire species. Why not? Humans have been doing it for thousands of years. They domesticated wolves, horses, cats that barely tolerate their existence, and something called cows that they somehow convinced to stand still while being milked. If they can domesticate other species, surely we can return the favor. Brooks found herself caught between outrage and fascination. On one hand, being treated like a pet was insulting. On the other hand, if it meant avoiding galactic quarantine and possibly getting treats. The beauty of this approach, Zara continued, is that humans actually seem to enjoy being taken care of. They voluntarily pay other humans to bring them food, clean their living spaces, and make decisions for them. This arrangement would simply formalize that relationship. Krikstal was frantically calculating the political implications. Even if your theory has merit, who would be responsible for managing an entire species of human pets? Zara's grin widened. I volunteer for that position. 2 weeks later, Brooks found herself in the most surreal situation of her career, and that was saying something considering she'd once had to negotiate a peace treaty with sentient gas clouds who communicated exclusively through interpretive dance. Zara had set up what she called a human habitat aboard the research station Kepler Prime, complete with what appeared to be the galaxy's most expensive doggy daycare. There were climbing structures that looked suspiciously like jungle gyms, various toys and puzzle boxes, and something that Zara insisted on calling a treat dispenser, but was obviously just a fancy vending machine. Good morning, humans, Zara announced cheerfully as she entered the habitat carrying a clipboard and what appeared to be a bag of snacks. Time for your morning enrichment activities. Tank looked up from where he'd been examining one of the puzzle boxes. Please tell me those aren't dog biscuits. They are specially formulated nutrition bars designed to meet human dietary requirements while providing positive reinforcement for good behavior, Zara replied. They come in 3 flavors, chocolate chip, peanut butter, and something called birthday cake. Luna grabbed one and took a bite. These are actually pretty good. That's beside the point, Brooks protested. We're not actually pets, Dr. Voss. We're sentient beings with our own agency and decision-making capabilities. Of course you are, Zara agreed soothingly. You're very smart humans. The smartest humans I've ever worked with. Brooks felt an uncomfortable warm feeling at the praise and immediately became suspicious of her own reaction. Are you using positive reinforcement on me right now? Maybe a little, Zara admitted with a grin. Is it working? Unfortunately, yes. The daily routine was both humiliating and oddly relaxing. Zara had scheduled regular meal times, exercise periods, and what she called intellectual stimulation sessions that were basically just giving them interesting problems to solve. Brooks had to admit that having someone else handle all the administrative nonsense while she focused on the fun parts of space exploration wasn't entirely terrible. The breaking point came during what Zara had labeled grooming time. "I am not letting you brush my hair," Brooks declared, backing away from the alien xenobiologist who was advancing with what appeared to be a very expensive-looking hairbrush. "It's important for human social bonding," Zara insisted. "My research indicates that humans engage in mutual grooming behaviors as a sign of trust and affection." "That's not—" "Okay, that's not entirely wrong, but context matters," Brooks protested. Tank, who had been watching the proceedings with amusement while munching on what were definitely not dog treats, spoke up. "You know what's funny? This is probably the most relaxed I've been in years. No paperwork, no bureaucratic nonsense, 3 meals a day, and someone else deals with all the boring stuff." "Don't encourage her," Brooks hissed. "I'm just saying, there are worse ways to live." Luna nodded agreement from where she was sprawled on what Zara called a human bed, but was obviously just a very comfortable couch. "Remember that posting on Rigel 7 where we had to fill out 17 different forms just to use the bathroom? That was bureaucratic nightmare, but it doesn't justify being treated like pets." Zara, meanwhile, was taking extensive notes. "Fascinating. Humans appear to have varying tolerance levels for structured care. Subject 1 shows resistance to authority, while subjects 2 and 3 demonstrate adaptability to new social hierarchies." "We have names," Brooks pointed out. "Of course you do. Riley, Tank, and Luna. Very good human names." The condescending tone should have been infuriating, but something about Zara's genuine enthusiasm made it hard to stay angry. She clearly wasn't trying to be insulting. She was just approaching the situation with the same scientific curiosity she'd probably use to study any new species. "Dr. Voss," Brooks said carefully, "can I ask you something?" "Of course, Riley. Good humans who ask questions politely get extra treats." Brooks decided to ignore that. "Why are you really doing this? I mean, what's your actual endgame here?" For just a moment, Zara's cheerful facade slipped, and Brooks caught a glimpse of something much sharper underneath. "Let's just say I have my reasons for wanting to prove that supposedly uncontrollable species can be valuable allies rather than threats." Before Brooks could ask what that meant, alarms started blaring throughout the station. The emergency klaxons were still wailing when Krixtal's panicked voice crackled over the station's communication system. "All personnel to emergency stations! We have a Code Omega situation in Sector 7! Zara dropped her clipboard and rushed to the nearest console. "What's a Code Omega?" she called out to nobody in particular. "Ancient automated defense system," Brooks replied grimly, already moving toward the habitat's exit. "Probably left over from the 9th Galactic War. They're programmed to eliminate any threats to their designated protected zones, and they don't much care about collateral damage." "How do you know that?" Zara asked, following them into the corridor where other station personnel were running around in various states of panic. "We ran into one about 6 months ago near the Vega system," Tank explained. "Nasty piece of work. Took us 3 days to shut it down." They reached the main observation deck just in time to see something that looked like a mechanical nightmare emerging from what had previously been empty space. The ancient weapon system resembled a cross between a space station and a very angry metallic octopus, with energy conduits crackling along its hull and weapon ports opening like hungry mouths. Krixtal was standing in front of the main tactical display, his 4 eyes wide with terror. It appeared without warning and immediately began scanning the station. "Our defensive systems are completely outclassed." "What's it looking for?" Zara demanded. "According to our analysis, it's designed to eliminate any species that exhibits unpredictable behavioral patterns," Vexnara replied, her tentacles writhing with anxiety. "Species that might pose a threat to galactic stability." Brooks felt a chill run down her spine. "Species like humans." "The irony is not lost on us," Krixtal muttered. On the tactical display, they could see the Council's response fleet moving into defensive positions around the station. Their ships were impressive examples of advanced alien engineering, sleek and efficient, and designed according to thousands of years of strategic doctrine. They lasted approximately 47 seconds. The ancient defense system's weapons tore through the fleet's shields like they were made of tissue paper. Energy beams that could have carved continents reduced state-of-the-art warships to drifting debris in moments. "Well," Tank observed with his characteristic understatement, "that's not good." Brooks was studying the tactical readouts with the kind of intense focus she usually reserved for figuring out how to fix broken warp drives with kitchen utensils. "Zara, I need you to unlock our ship and get us access to the station's maintenance systems." "Why?" "Because that thing is operating on ancient programming. It's following predictable attack patterns based on conventional defensive strategies." Brooks turned to face the xenobiologist with a grin that Tank and Luna recognized as her about to do something incredibly stupid and probably successful expression. "Lucky for us, humans don't do conventional." 10 minutes later, they were aboard Brooks's ship, the appropriately named Controlled Chaos, racing toward the ancient weapon system, while the rest of the station's defensive fleet tried to regroup and figure out what the hell was happening. "Okay, here's the plan," Brooks announced over the comm system. "Luna, I need you to reroute power from life support to the coffee maker in the galley." "The coffee maker?" Luna's voice came back incredulous. "Riley, now is not the time for caffeine. Trust me on this. Tank, remember that batch of experimental energy drinks you've been working on? The ones that made Jenkins' hair glow in the dark for a week? Yeah, what about them? Mix them with the emergency duct tape supply and prepare for a very unconventional torpedo launch." Zara, who was monitoring their approach from the co-pilot seat, looked like she was watching a masterclass in applied insanity. "This plan makes no sense whatsoever." "That's why it'll work," Brooks replied cheerfully. "Ancient defense systems are programmed to counter logical threats. They're not prepared for someone who weaponizes coffee and energy drinks." What followed was 15 minutes of the most chaotic space combat in recorded galactic history. Brooks used the coffee maker's heating element to create a makeshift electromagnetic pulse generator. Tank's energy drinks, when combined with duct tape and creative engineering, somehow formed an adhesive compound that gummed up the ancient system's weapon ports. Luna managed to hack into the defense system's targeting computers by using a combination of Earth jazz music and what appeared to be a recipe for banana bread. The ancient weapon system, designed to counter logical military tactics, had no protocols for dealing with humans who treated physics more like guidelines than laws. "It's working," Zara exclaimed as the massive system began to power down, its mechanical tentacles going limp as its central processing core struggled to comprehend what had just happened to it. Back on the station, the Galactic Council watched in stunned silence as the greatest threat they'd faced in decades was neutralized by 3 humans, a coffee maker, and what Tank insisted on calling experimental beverages. "How?" Crickstall whispered. "How is this possible?" Zara stood up slowly, her expression thoughtful. "Because sometimes, the best solution is the one nobody expects." 3 hours later, the emergency session of the Galactic Council had reconvened, but the atmosphere was considerably different from their previous meeting. Instead of panic and fear, there was a grudging sense of awe, mixed with the kind of bewilderment usually reserved for watching someone solve a Rubik's Cube while riding a unicycle. Brooks, Tank, and Luna sat in the center of the chamber, looking remarkably casual for 3 people who had just saved the galaxy using coffee and energy drinks. Tank was still carrying one of his experimental beverages, which continued to glow faintly green. "Let me make sure I understand this correctly," Vex Nara began, consulting her notes with the careful precision of someone trying to document the impossible. "You defeated an ancient automated defense system by confusing it with illogical tactics." "That's a bit of an oversimplification," Brooks replied. "We defeated it by thinking outside the parameters of its programming. Ancient systems like that are designed to counter known threats using established tactical doctrine. They're not prepared for creative problem solving." "You used a coffee maker as a weapon," Crickstall pointed out weakly. "Technically, we used it as a component in an electromagnetic pulse generator," Luna corrected. "The weaponization was more of a side effect." Zara, who had been unusually quiet since they'd returned to the station, finally stood up. "Esteemed council members, I believe recent events have proven my point more effectively than any scientific presentation could have." She activated a holographic display showing footage from the battle. "Humans aren't uncontrollable because they're chaotic. They're unpredictable because they think creatively. They see solutions where others see problems. And they're willing to try approaches that seem impossible because they don't limit themselves to conventional thinking." The council watched as the footage showed their 3 pet humans systematically dismantling a threat that had reduced the galaxy's finest military fleet to scrap metal. Furthermore, Zara continued, I believe I may have misrepresented my research to you. Brooks raised an eyebrow. Misrepresented how? Zara's grin returned, but this time it had a distinctly mischievous edge. Humans aren't my first attempt at domesticating a supposedly uncontrollable species. She pulled up a new display showing what appeared to be a collection of creatures that defied easy description. There was something that looked like a cross between a dragon and a disco ball, a plant that appeared to be knitting, and what might have been a sentient geometric equation. Meet my other pets, Zara announced proudly. The Vorthan Chaos Weavers, the Singing Crystals of Andromeda, and a few others that various governments have declared too dangerous for civilized space. The council stared in horror. Tank started laughing. You've been collecting uncontrollable species, Brooks said, torn between admiration and concern, like some kind of galactic Noah's Ark for misfits. I prefer to think of it as a sanctuary for misunderstood civilizations, Zara replied. Besides, as today proved, what others call chaos, I call potential. Krixtal's voice was barely a whisper. How many others are there? Oh, not many. Maybe a dozen or so species that have been quarantined or exiled for being too unpredictable for proper society. Zara's expression became thoughtful. Though I have been keeping an eye on the Jovian cloud dancers. They show promise. Vexenara's tentacles had gone completely limp. This is madness. This is progress, Brooks corrected. Dr. Voss, I think we need to discuss a formal partnership. What kind of partnership? Zara asked, though her expression suggested she already knew. You need people who understand creative problem-solving. We need someone who can navigate galactic bureaucracy without getting us quarantined every 6 months. Brooks gestured around the chamber. Plus, I'm curious to meet your other pets. Tank finished his glowing energy drink and casually tossed the container into a recycling unit. I vote yes. This sounds way more interesting than standard diplomatic missions. Agreed, Luna added. Besides, someone needs to make sure Zara doesn't accidentally adopt any species that are actually dangerous instead of just misunderstood. The Galactic Council exchanged worried looks. They had the distinct impression that they'd just witnessed the formation of something that would either revolutionize interspecies relations or result in the complete restructuring of galactic civilization as they knew it. Probably both. Very well, Vexenara announced with the resignation of someone who had given up trying to control the universe. Dr. Voss, you are hereby appointed as Director of Non-Standard Species Integration. Your first assignment is to ensure that humanity remains a constructive member of the galactic community. And our second assignment? Brooks asked. Zara's grin could have been seen from orbit. Road trip to pick up the Chaos Weavers. They've been stuck on a quarantine planet for 3 years, and I promised I'd come back for them. As the council session officially adjourned and representatives began filing out with varying expressions of bewilderment and resignation, Brooks found herself looking forward to whatever impossible situation they'd find themselves in next. After all, the galaxy had just learned that sometimes the best pets are the ones that refuse to be tamed.